At my grandmother's funeral, my sister whispered to her friend, "We're listing Emily as having declined the inheritance. It made everything easier." I wasn't supposed to hear that. That's when I pulled out my phone and started recording everything they said next. My name is Emily, and I'm a 32-year-old estate planning paralegal. Yes, you read that right. While my family was busy forging documents and committing inheritance fraud, they had no idea I'd spent the last 8 years working for one of Boston's most prestigious estate law firms. They thought I was just the quiet daughter who didn't need much and would never fight back. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. Standing there in my black dress, holding my phone steady as Ashley continued talking, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete strategic clarity. This wasn't grief anymore. This was evidence collection. "The paperwork was so easy to handle," Ashley was saying to her friend. "Mom and Dad took care of everything. Emily's signature was already on file from when Grandma first made the will, so we just used that. She never checks legal stuff anyway." I almost laughed. Never checks legal stuff? I literally draft estate documents for a living. I've handled over 300 inheritance cases, caught dozens of fraudulent signatures, and helped clients recover millions in stolen assets. But to my family, I was still just the invisible daughter who couldn't possibly understand complicated legal matters. The recording was crystal clear. Ashley admitting they used my signature without permission. My parents taking care of everything. The casual dismissal that I'd never check or fight back. In 3 minutes of conversation, they just handed me enough evidence to destroy them financially and possibly send them to prison. But I wasn't going to rush into anything. That's the difference between someone who actually practices law and someone who just thinks they're smart enough to commit fraud. I had a strategy. My professional background gave me advantages my family couldn't even comprehend. At Blackstone and Associates, I worked directly under Patricia Blackstone, one of the most ruthless estate attorneys in Massachusetts. She's recovered over $50 million in fraudulent inheritance cases and has never lost a contested will dispute. More importantly, she's watched me handle complex cases for years and trusts my judgment completely. I also have access to forensic handwriting experts, private investigators who specialize in financial fraud, and a network of attorneys who've seen every trick families use to steal from each other. My annual salary of $87,000 means I can afford to fight this properly, and my professional reputation means I get significant discounts on services that would bankrupt most people trying to challenge an inheritance dispute. But the real advantage was something my family never understood. I'd been documenting their behavior toward me for years, not because I planned to sue them, but because working in estate law teaches you that families lie about everything. Every dismissive comment, every time they excluded me from decisions about Grandma's care, every conversation where they talked about my inheritance like I wasn't in the room, I had records of all of it. The Monday after the funeral, I walked into Patricia's office with my evidence file. She listened to the recording twice, reviewed my documentation, and just shook her head. "Emily, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of inheritance fraud I've ever seen," she said. "They didn't just forge your signature. They documented themselves doing it, and they did it to someone who works in estate law." She paused. "Do they have any idea what they've just done?" "None whatsoever," I replied. "They still think I'm the quiet one who won't cause problems." Patricia smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Let's educate them." Within 48 hours, we had a forensic handwriting analysis confirming that my signature on the inheritance waiver was forged. The expert, Dr. James Fletcher, has testified in over 200 cases and charges $500 per hour. His report was devastating. Not only was the signature clearly traced from an older document, but whoever forged it made several elementary mistakes that proved definitively it wasn't written by the same person. Next, we filed a formal challenge with the probate court. requesting immediate suspension of any transactions involving the property until the ownership dispute could be resolved. This meant Ashley's plans to renovate and flip the house were suddenly frozen. No contractors, no permits, no work of any kind could proceed. Then came my favorite part, the asset investigation. Using resources available through my firm, we started documenting my family's financial situation. This is where my professional expertise became a weapon they never saw coming. My parents had mortgaged their house to help fund Ashley's renovation plans. Ashley had quit her job to focus on the flip project full-time, expecting to make $200,000 profit within 6 months. My dad had co-signed a $85,000 construction loan. They'd already spent $23,000 on architectural plans and materials. In other words, they were financially exposed in ways that would destroy them if the house sale fell through. And I was about to make sure it did. The first legal notice arrived at their homes on a Wednesday. It was beautiful in its professional simplicity, a cease and desist order requiring them to halt all activity related to the disputed property, accompanied by a formal notification that they were under investigation for inheritance fraud and document forgery. The calls started within an hour, my mother crying, my father angry. Ashley panicked. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I was in Patricia's office preparing the next phase of our strategy. "Here's what they don't understand," Patricia explained as we reviewed the case files. "Inheritance fraud isn't just a civil matter. In Massachusetts, forging someone's signature on estate documents is a felony. They could face up to 5 years in prison and $25,000 in fines, each. But we weren't going for criminal charges initially. We were going for something that would hurt them more, complete financial devastation. Our next filing was a motion for immediate damages, claiming not just my share of the inheritance, but additional compensation for fraud, emotional distress, and legal costs. We also requested that the court freeze all of my parents' assets pending resolution of the case, since they'd used fraudulently obtained property as collateral for other loans. The house had been appraised at $340,000. My legitimate share was $170,000. But our damages claim was for $425,000, plus legal fees, plus interest, plus punitive damages for the criminal fraud. We were asking for more than $1 million total. 2 weeks after filing, I received a certified letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. My family had hired an attorney. Reading their response was like watching someone show up to a gunfight with a water balloon. Their lawyer argued that my signature had been used in good faith, based on conversations where I'd allegedly expressed disinterest in the property. They claimed my parents had reasonably believed I wanted to waive my inheritance. They suggested mediation to resolve this family dispute amicably. Patricia read their response and started laughing. "Emily, they hired a personal injury lawyer who's never handled an estate case, and their arguments are legally nonsensical. You can't forge someone's signature in good faith. That's not how fraud works." Our response brief was a masterpiece of legal demolition. Patricia systematically destroyed every argument they'd made, cited 17 precedent cases, and included audio analysis of my recorded conversations, proving that no such discussions about waiving inheritance had ever occurred. But the real knockout punch was our counter motion for summary judgment. We argued that the evidence of fraud was so overwhelming that no trial was necessary. The court should immediately restore my inheritance and award damages. That's when my family finally understood they were in serious trouble. The angry calls stopped. The guilt-trip voicemails ended. Instead, I got a text from my mother asking if we could talk privately, family to family. I ignored it. This was no longer a family matter. This was a legal case, and I was going to win it professionally. The breakthrough came when Dr. Fletcher completed his expanded forensic analysis. Not only had they forged my signature on the inheritance waiver, but they'd also forged it on several related documents, including a letter allegedly from me requesting that Ashley handle all estate matters. Each forged signature was another felony count. Patricia counted them up. 7 separate incidents of document forgery, plus conspiracy charges since all 3 family members were involved in the scheme. At this point, Patricia told me, we have enough evidence to destroy them completely. The question is, how badly do you want to hurt them? I thought about that question for a long time. These were people who had raised me, who I'd once loved, but they were also people who had systematically erased me from their lives and then tried to steal my inheritance while I stood right there listening to them brag about how easy it had been. I want them to understand that actions have consequences, I said finally, and I want to make sure they never forget what it costs to underestimate someone. Our final motion was elegant in its thoroughness. We requested immediate restoration of my full inheritance, plus $300,000 in punitive damages, plus all legal fees, plus a formal court finding that my family had committed inheritance fraud. We also requested that the court refer the matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I wore my best professional suit, the same one I wore when representing clients in court. My family sat across the courtroom with their overwhelmed attorney, looking like they'd finally realized they were drowning. Judge Ramirez reviewed our evidence for 20 minutes before looking up. I've been handling estate cases for 15 years, she said, and I've never seen such clear-cut documentary evidence of inheritance fraud. The defendant's actions show a pattern of deliberate deception that goes well beyond simple family disagreement. The ruling was everything we'd asked for and more. Full restoration of my inheritance, $285,000 in damages, all legal fees, and a formal court finding of fraud. The judge also noted that she was forwarding the case to the DA's Office for Criminal Review. But the real victory was watching my family's faces as the financial reality hit them. The house they'd mortgaged to fund Ashley's project now had a $285,000 lien against it. The construction loan my father had co-signed was now in default. Ashley's renovation project was permanently dead, and she owed thousands in contractor penalties. Within 6 months, they'd lost everything. My parents had to sell their house to pay the judgment. Ashley had to declare bankruptcy. My father's business suffered because word got out about the fraud conviction, and customers didn't want to work with someone who stole from their own family. I, meanwhile, used my restored inheritance and damage award to make a down payment on a $450,000 house in the best neighborhood in town. I also got a promotion at the firm, partly because Patricia was so impressed with how I'd handled my own case. The final conversation happened when my mother called me 6 months after the judgment. She was living in a rental apartment, working part-time at a grocery store, facing the possibility of criminal charges. "We never meant for this to happen," she said. "We just thought. We thought you didn't care about family things. You were always so independent." "Being independent doesn't mean I don't deserve what's legally mine," I replied. "And stealing from someone because you think they won't fight back isn't a mistake. It's a crime." "But we're still family," she said desperately. "No," I said calmly. "Family doesn't forge signatures and commit fraud. Family doesn't erase people and then act surprised when those people fight back. You made me a legal adversary when you decided to steal from me, and I'm better at being a legal adversary than you ever imagined. Today, 2 years later, I own my grandmother's house and my new house. Ashley works retail, still dealing with bankruptcy consequences, and has never attempted to contact me. My parents live in a small apartment and are still paying off legal debts from the case that destroyed their finances. As for me, I made partner at Blackstone and Associates last year. My specialty is inheritance fraud cases, and I've never lost one. I help people recover what families tried to steal from them, and I'm very, very good at it. Sometimes the quiet ones aren't quiet because they're weak. Sometimes they're quiet because they're smart enough to wait for the perfect moment to speak. And when we finally do speak, we make sure everyone listens.